So, Secretary Clinton, you also write about the state of our politics quite a bit in the book and your reaction to some of the things you've seen over the last few years. Thinking about this campaign right now, we actually had a clip from you as you were recording your audio book that we played last week when this change came at the top of the Democratic ticket and your reaction to it. There was lots of consternation ahead of time about whether Joe Biden should stay or go. And when he made the announcement, you and President Clinton sort of stepped very quickly into the gap and said, we endorse Kamala Harris. This is a good thing for the party. So tell me about your thinking before and after. Did you think before that the president made that decision to step aside that that was the right thing to do?
Well, I, like many people, wanted the president to make the decision that was right for him and right for the country, which he did. And I've said before, it was a really selfless act of patriotism. I can't imagine the candidate on the other side giving up power under any circumstance. And President Biden did. And he immediately endorsed his vice president. And then Bill and I absolutely moved quickly to endorse Kamala as well. And we did it for a couple of reasons. One, I've known her for a number of years. I am a fan of hers. I think she has handled herself extremely well during the vice presidency, starting in COVID, under really difficult circumstances. And it's a tough job being vice president under any presidency, no matter what's happening in the country. And I had a lot of confidence in her sort of political touch and feel. I also thought it was better for the party and the country that we get behind President Biden's endorsement of her. People who talked about, let's have a contested convention, let's have some sort of contest in, 6 weeks, I think underestimated what chaos would have done to that presidential campaign and to the prospects for the Democrats. But in any event, she rose to the occasion. She's run a flawless campaign ever since she got into it. We talked to her literally right after the president decided to step aside. And I have been incredibly impressed and delighted to see the country meeting her, to see how people are responding to her, and to see the joy. When I was talking to Joe and Mika and just a minute ago, I mean, look, life is hard. Politics is really brutal. It's a contact sport. And to think that the other side in this campaign wants people to be afraid and filled with anger and hatred and trying to hurt other people is so terrible and so un-American. And now we have with, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, two happy warriors, two people who will fight for us, who will work for us, and don't want us to hate each other. They want us actually to find some common ground.
So what is your assessment of the stakes of this election? I mean, you are in a very exclusive club of people who've ever run for president, let alone run against Donald Trump. So to what extent do you offer counsel or do you speak with Kamala Harris about how to run against Donald Trump, who, as you've said, is a different candidate now, a darker candidate, arguably, than he was in 2016?
That's absolutely true, Willie. I've talked with Kamala a few times. I obviously talked with her before the debate because he is more incoherent. He is angrier. He is lashing out all the time at everybody. He's filled with grievance and rage. And, in my acceptance speech at the convention way back in 2016, I said, you can't trust somebody with nuclear weapons who you can bait with a tweet, because I saw that in him at the time. A lot of people didn't, or they gave him the benefit of the doubt, or they thought, hey, we've had 2 terms of a Democrat, let's try the Republicans, for whatever reason. I understand that. But now the stakes are even higher because he has a record. We have seen him try to abuse power. We have seen him try to overturn a legitimate, free, fair election. We have watched him bungle COVID and cause unnecessary deaths and pain. So he has a record. And in addition to that, he's told us what he's going to do. He is absolutely linked to this Project 2025 and all of their dark and dystopian efforts to turn the clock back on Americans' rights and the way we live and how we, look at our futures together. And he has a long rhetorical record now of making it very clear that he would be unaccountable if he were ever near the White House again.
Madam Secretary, as you just said, there's so much at stake and there's proof as to what is at stake. So those who believe in our democracy would consider this an all-hands-on-deck moment.
Right.
Military officials on both sides of the aisle, former members of Trump's administration, many Republicans have stepped up, signed letters, and even said they're going to vote for Kamala Harris. Who in the Republican Party, high up, who you think could move the meter, do you think should step up and make that same declaration?
Well, Mika, I wish everybody would. Everybody who knows the danger that he poses. And frankly, having served in the Senate for 8 years, and I've heard Joe say this on the show many times, we know that the Republicans we served with, we know the Republicans who are still there, many of them know better. And what is holding them back and making them have this allegiance to Trump, I don't, fully understand. And in the book, I write about what it would be like to having fallen asleep now and not know who won, and waking up after the election and after the inauguration and to see what Trump is doing, which is implementing his policy with military troops in the street to, grab the woman who waits on you at the diner, pick up the guy who's, mowing the grass in the neighbor's yard, not because you have any information about them, but because of the way they look or maybe their first language. That is unimaginable, but that is what is being promised. So right. I would ask every Republican. A lot of people decided not to run from the Congress when they knew that they could not support Trump, and they knew that if they didn't, they'd be primaried. Let them step up. But what's most important to me are the people who have served with him. They are sounding a 3-alarm fire is possible. They are telling us they were in the Defense Department, the White House, Homeland Security, across his government. They're begging us, please, I saw him. Don't put him in power again.
Yeah, and the hope is to have a real Republican Party again. I mean, if that could be rebuilt in some way, that would be good for our democracy. And as a Democrat, I think we agree on that, which is why I wonder, members of the Bush family, Condoleezza Rice, who could move the meter and perhaps give other Republicans serving right now the permission structure to break out of this hold?
I wish they all would. I've written before about sitting next to President George W. Bush at, Trump's inauguration. And instead of hearing what you expect to hear, which is, I want to be the president for everybody, it was a hard campaign, now let's pull together as Americans, the kind of things that I would have said and other people say. We heard about carnage in the streets, and we saw this dark, dystopian image of our country, which is unrecognizable. And at the end of it, President Bush turned to me and said, that was some weird shit. And so, honestly, he knew it then. We have seen all of this unfold. I'm not going to speak for him. He has to make his own decisions about public statements. But everybody who cares about this country, which I know they do, I worked with them. I was the senator from New York on 9/11. I was in the Oval Office 2 days later. I told the president what we needed to rebuild New York, $20 billion. He looked at me. He said, you've got it. And he never wavered. They love this country. They know this man who is running at the head of their party is a wrecking ball for everything we believe in. So everyone should, this is a full hands on deck moment. And you never know what might influence somebody in their voting. I personally think Taylor Swift is, getting people to go out and register and hopefully turn out to vote. But I do know from, working on this book and writing about the stakes, our country would be unrecognizable if this man got his hands on power again. And, I love what some of the Republicans are saying who are endorsing Kamala. They're saying, look, I don't agree with her on anything. Liz Cheney is a perfect example. Dick Cheney, for heaven's sakes. I don't agree with her. But what we do agree on is we have to save our democracy first and foremost. Then we can start arguing again. We can have all the policy disputes about everything under the sun that you can imagine. But let's not let this man have power again.